Welcome to Monkey Chatter. Monkey Chatter is a podcast by three great friends who have different perspectives on all things wellness. So let's jump right into today's topic.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Monkey Chatter. This is Michelle, and I'm here with Amy and Lara. And I'm so excited because we are going to be talking to Lara today. We're going to do a little interviewing of her. And I have so many questions for Lara. And I was so excited to do this. So I'm going to do a little bit of intro about how I know Lara and sort of my thoughts and, what Lara brings to the table. So this could be kind of fun. But you've already heard our stories, my story and Amy's, and, about how we met Lara through work and all of that. But I think the thing about Lara that I have been so impressed with and so just feel really privileged to have watched over the years is her really changing what her life was about. It's been really incredible. And so, my questions will definitely be along those lines. But for those of you that, don't know, like Lara met Amy and I in our, ag sales days. And we got to do a bunch of trade shows together and spend a lot of time together doing fun things like tailgates and, um, a lot of horsey events. And so, that was super fun. And then Lara went off and did some other things and then has now landed with her own salt cave. And seriously, I have some questions about that. Um, but also the transition when Lara was starting to do more yoga and all of that happened to coincide with my um a little bit with my coaching journey. And I think I've mentioned that Lara was one of my first test coaching clients, and I will always be grateful to her for that. She's a fabulous client, unlike me, who
He's not a resistant little creature.
right, like me who does that. Lara is probably one of the most open and giving and really thoughtful human beings I've ever met. And so it was really a joy to, work with her on the coach side. And of course, then watching everything that has gone on since then has been super fun. So, with that, hi, Lara.
Welcome to the show.
Oh, hi,
Welcome to the
Amy.
show.
Thanks for joining us on Monkey Chatter.
Yes.
my pleasure. I'm so happy to be here.
So, do I get to ask the first question, or do you want to go first, Dame?
Oh, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
We didn't really plan that out.
Okay. All right. So, are you ready, Lara?
Yeah, I'm ready. Fire
Okay.
away. I'm excited to hear what you
Fire
don't know about me.
I'm pretty excited too. So,
So pigs when you were little.
What? What was that question?
Did you share pigs when you were little?
I
Show
did
pigs, not share. Sorry.
I was like,
oh my gosh. Anyway, we'll have to talk
Yeah.
about that later.
yeah, if you haven't watched the last episode, you're
You
missing out on
got
the
it.
pig story.
You need to know
This
about
is just a shout out to the previous episode. You've got
Oh,
to go
listen
back
to
and
that.
listen, or you will never know the pig story. And it is well worth listening to.
Really. Okay, so this is not a pig question. Okay, just a heads up. So you're 4 years in, you just celebrated your 4-year anniversary at the Lexington Salt Cave. Kudos to you. That's amazing. Is there anything you wish that somebody would have told you before you started that would have been helpful?
Oh, yes. Yeah, you know what comes to mind immediately is that I wish somebody had told me it was okay to change my mind. Like I didn't have you don't need to have everything set in stone the minute you open your doors. Things can change and evolve to suit not only you, the owner, but your customers, your staff, your schedule, things that are going on in the world. And I felt very much like I had to, pick the hours, pick the schedule, set everything up in our booking system, and have it all perfect and laid out like before I ever opened my doors. And so, 4 years later, I totally see how I was very inflexible in the beginning with certain things where I could have, I don't think it really hampered me in the long run, but I think what it did was stress me out.
Right.
And I took on a lot more stress and anxiety over that than I needed to, because I could have just not worried about making changes. It's okay to change things as you go. That would be my advice to anybody who's starting a new business, whether it's brick and mortar or they're going out just like, on their own, is, start out with what you feel in your gut is working. And then halfway through, if it's not working, change it up.
Yeah.
It's never too late.
Don't you think that's like, just a life lesson in general? I think about all the kids who are coming out of school, or, they get asked that question, what are you going to do when you graduate from college or whatever? And there's that pressure and to make a decision. And then the idea that you can't, oh, well, I went to college for XYZ. I can't, and I hate it, but I can't not do it because, I made that decision. So
yeah, that's so funny that you related it to that, because it really is like that. And of all people, I should definitely know that it's okay to change course, because I did that. Like, I stressed about it then too, but I've changed course many times throughout my life, but yet I still felt like I had to be rigidly set to whatever it was I started out with.
and you
And
didn't.
As an add-on to that, what is one of the biggest changes that you made?
You mean in life or at the
since you opened or whatever?
So I think a good example of that would be first of all, hours, like setting your store hours or your hours of business. That might have been one of the biggest changes I've made. Like, I set certain hours, and I had this thing in my head, like, you can't change your hours once you set your hours, right? And I set them based on a couple of things. I set them first based on my preference, because in the beginning, especially, I was the only one there. I was the person behind the desk, person answering the phone, the person doing all the social media, all the marketing, all the ordering, all the cleanup, all the greeting, 100% of everything. There were no employees in the very beginning. And so I am not a morning person. And thanks to something called human design, which I think we need to have an episode on in the future, I learned that I am not made to be a morning person, and there's no reason I need to strive to be a morning person when I'm not naturally like that. And then I'm at my best when I allow myself to wake up when I am normally wanting to wake up, which turns out is not that late anyways. It's like, 7:00 in the morning, maybe 7:30 if it's, winter and dark. But it feels so much better to me to follow that natural rhythm. And that means that I'm not necessarily out of the house, like when all these years I worked in the horse industry and you had to be at work at like 7:30. It was really hard for me. And then when I started working at a so-called normal job where you went to an office and it was like 9 to 5, and same thing, I still struggled a little bit to be like, get out of the house and be there at 9. Although I was fresh and alert in the morning, I just wasn't motivated. I think that's the difference. So I was like, I'm not opening a business until 11 o'clock. That's my sweet spot. Like, I'm out of the house by 10 or 10:15, and I get there at 10:30 latest, and I have 30 minutes to open. And it's like, that's totally my sweet spot. And I love it. But I struggled in the beginning. I was like, okay, should I do a 10 o'clock? Should I have a day where I open at 9? Should I stay open till 7 or 8 and make it later? And, we were typically 11 to 6, and I just like stressed. And then I stressed about, we started our salt cave sessions like at the top of the hour. And then for a while I was like, well, maybe I should do some 30 minutes and I'll start them on the 15s. And I had all this like just judging and questioning and not trusting my intuition, basically, of what felt good in your gut. And with human design, that is part of my design. I'm something called a generator, and generators really do get things done. Like, we do this thing, but we also, depending on the type you are, I'm very gut oriented. I'm very intuitive. So I feel it. It has to feel right. And I usually know right away how it feels. So if I'm going against something that I know doesn't feel good to me in my gut, then I already know I'm like probably not going down the right path. So that's probably why I second guessed. I was trying to use my brain too much, not my intuition.
And gosh, Lara, that is, first of all, I can't wait to hear more about human design. That sounds fascinating. So like you said, we'll have to save that for another podcast.
It was an eye opener.
I'm like, ooh, tell me more about that. But I think, when I think back myself to decisions that I've made, and you just hit on it, when my gut was like, yeah, that's not, and you do it anyway, like, you're right. Those invariably, I mean, it may last for a while. Like, you may be able to muddle through and make it work, but it never really is the same as when you're like, yes, this is the thing.
Yeah. So sorry, Amy. It's going to make this podcast go on the E explicit, but it needs to be a hell yes.
Yeah.
If it's not a hell yes for me, I already know it's not the right direction. So like now I'm so much better at checking in. A good example, like this yoga retreat that I'm doing in October. Shout out to my yoga retreat, everybody. It's not mine, but I was invited to co-teach on a yoga retreat.
In
The
Italy,
minute my
just
friend
FYI,
in Italy, in
it's
Tuscany, wine and yoga, and literally the friend of mine who is the lead teacher, when she reached out and invited me, my brain was like, oh, you should really give this a few days to think about it. My gut was like, hell yeah. And so she said, you can think about it if you want. I'm like, nope, I don't need to think about it. I'm doing it. I don't even think I knew the actual dates. I just knew what month it was at the time. So like when you have that response, like for me, when I have that response, like that, I have started now to really learn to trust that. It's taken 58 years.
Well, I mean, the fact that well, first of all, 58 years, thank goodness, like finally.
Which would take 98.
Right? Like,
That's
and
true.
I think when everything, let's face it, the culture that we're raised in, and certainly the generational, maybe younger folks are better at this, but I feel like we were really raised to not trust that, right? Like, get the data, get the facts, remember the pros and cons, like you sit down with a piece of
I still do
paper
that.
with all the pros and all the cons. And so to learn to really trust your gut and go with it, even if your pro and con paper doesn't match it.
Yeah, usually the pro and cons matches it, which is interesting. But every now and then there'll be too much equality on the pros and cons side, and then you got to really go with your gut.
I love
that was a really long answer to Amy's question, but
it's okay.
That's the thing. It wasn't anything big. It was the constant little things that I was questioning, and like, should I change this? Should I change that? And I didn't really have anybody to run things by because I wasn't a partner, and so that was a bit of a struggle bus ride for me in the beginning. But now I'm much more open. I'm like, yeah, let's, we'll throw that at the wall and see if it sticks. And if it works, maybe we'll bring it back next month or the month after. Like, I would second guess everything in the beginning. That's one of the biggest things I've gotten over, mostly over.
So that like kind of ties into, and maybe you have more to add to that question, but it kind of ties into one of my questions. So do you want me to go on, or Michelle, did you have more?
Go ahead. Oh. No, I want to hear like part 2 here.
No, it's just so yeah, and you obviously alluded to this, but like you made this really big jump in your career. So one, it's kind of a 2-part question. Like, where did you get the courage to make that leap? And then 2, how did you like continue to move forward when, and since you already made us explicit, I will like how did you keep moving forward when shit got hard?
Sorry, the dog was making noise back there. Yeah, that's always a good question. You know, and it does speak to what you're always saying. We can do hard things.
Well, yeah, and it's never too late. Like,
never too late, and you can.
We've talked about it. You were in your 50s when this change happened.
Literally, it was 2019 when I came up with the idea, and I think I had already done some transitioning, like just personally. You know, I think we kind of talked about it a minute ago. Like Michelle alluded to this too. Like I did my yoga transformation or whatever you want to call it. But, I had been practicing yoga for probably 20 years at that point, but just, I wasn't super committed until like probably a few years before, I turned 50. And I had done it sporadically. I had done it off and on since like my late 20s. And once I discovered it, I loved it. And I continued to practice and go to classes and try different things. But I kind of rediscovered it, I guess, in my, when I was a little bit older and started just being really religious about going, to a class every week and learning more. And then there was an opportunity to go through teacher training. And I told myself, like, okay, that's a year-long commitment. And it's only once a month, but there was stuff in between that you had to do. And I was working full time and still had, like not kids at home, but, kids in college, one kid in high school. So I just was like, made that leap of faith to say like, I can do this. And I remember distinctly what happened was I was at this holiday service at a non-denominational service that my sister sings at, and it was a local place called Ahava. It was like it's spiritual center for spiritual living, and they always just had the most wonderful programs. So shout out to Ahava. But they had this service, and at the end, there was cards under your chair, and you would get the card, and you would write yourself a like holiday card, and they said write it as if you have just completed the year and you're like congratulating yourself on the year that you just had. And so I wrote, this was before I even, I think, signed up for the class. I wrote, "Congratulations on completing teacher training. I'm so proud of you." Well, then you drop it in a basket on your way out, and then they mail it the next year. So you forget all about it.
That's kind of cool.
Exactly what happened. So I totally forgot about it. And I had, and like the next week, I think I went ahead and signed up for the teacher training. And then the next year, we were almost through with the program, and I got that card in the mail. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so that for me was like, number one, the power of intention, right? We've talked about the power of intention and the power of, just like manifesting what you want, as if it were true. That's what we always say in Yoga Nidra. Imagine whatever you're stating, your intention for a practice is, you are stating it with the present tense as if it were true in this moment, as if it were true. So I think that was part of that, was writing that down and saying like, this is true. And since then I've done more of that, and it is kind of amazing how it works, because at the end of yoga teacher training, I did something similar, and I wrote down something about opening up my business, because at that point I had decided I wanted to, and the same thing kind of happened. It was like a year later, and then somehow we got whatever we wrote back, and it said, something about opening up the salt cave. And I was like, oh my gosh, it happened again. Amazing.
I have to ask you because I can't remember if I ever knew. Yoga, I get, right? Like in doing a yoga certification, and then you start teaching it. Where did you get the idea for a salt cave? I mean, that's really unusual. Like, I just knew about them because there's one in our town, and and I had gone there not for the salt cave, but to get a massage, and I'm like, "A salt cave? What kind of crazy thing is this?" You know? And so I did do some salt cave sessions, but I think most people, I mean, it's not something you just, like, run across in your day-to-day life, so how did you even know about it, and then how did you decide, "Oh, not only do I now know about it," like, I would be like, "Oh, well, let me go try it." No, Lara decides to, because you have to build them. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like you just go and, move into somebody else's salt cave, right? You have to, like,
True.
make your
Who
own.
would?
It's a big deal. When did you first get the idea of, "Oh, I think I want my business to be an actual salt cave"? Like, I've never heard this story.
So it is kind of a weird story. So I'm not very good at answering questions because I feel like I go all around
It's
about. But
okay. That's what we like about
I
you.
mean, so I have to back up a little because I had gone to a salt cave in Asheville, North Carolina, when I was on a girls' trip with some girlfriends, and it was probably 5 or 6 years prior to me going through yoga teacher training. And it was like our last day in the town, and we were kind of, we had some fun, so we were feeling a little tired and maybe a little hungover. And we were walking around town in Asheville, which was just, there's so many places you could walk and
Mm.
eat and drink and shop. And we kind of walked down this little side street, and there was this place called Asheville Salt Cave. And we were like, what's that? And they had all these salt lamps in the window, like, and you can look in there, and it was very like, ooh, like, what's in there? It looked kind of magical, like glowing salt lamps, and it looked really relaxing. And so we walked in the shop, and it had like all kinds of neat things like the salt lamps and bath salts and little natural products. And we were like, ooh, what is this place? And so we went to the desk, and the woman behind the desk was like, she's like, well, have you ever been to a salt cave? And we're like, oh, no. Like, what the hell's a salt cave? And so she was explaining what it was like. And she showed us some pictures, and it looked really cool. So we're like, okay, we want to do it. And she's like, okay, you guys can come back in like 45 minutes or an hour or whatever it was. So we're like, okay, we're going to go shop down the street. We'll be back. And we booked appointments, and we came back, and we went in and we did our appointments. We went into the salt cave, and even the most like fidgety of us, Kelly, her name is Kelly. She is not a person that can sit still. And even back then, most of us were not. We were like, busy moms and working moms and full-time jobs. And so sitting still and doing nothing was not on our radar. So we went in the salt cave, and we all like laid down in the salt or sat in the chairs. And like 45 minutes later, we all wake up from wherever we were, and we were like, what was that? I mean, we literally were like, that was the most relaxing thing we've ever done, and it wasn't hard. Like, we just zoned out. So we came out of there, and then we went back to Asheville a couple more times, and every time we were like, we have to go to the salt cave. And then we were like, we need a salt cave back home. Like, we really need one. And at the time, right around that same time, there was a salt room that opened up, and it was a little further away from Lexington, but not far. And it was really nice, and we enjoyed going there, but it wasn't quite as filled with salt. There wasn't quite as much salt, and so it was a little different from the experience we had in Nashville. So it wasn't something that really ended up becoming a real habit. But flash forward, yoga teacher training, it's 2019. I've graduated, and I woke up, literally, it was like December of 2019. I don't know what day, but doesn't really matter. But I just literally woke up that morning, and I knew I didn't want to teach yoga like full time or anything. And I didn't want to open a yoga studio. We have plenty of those. But I just woke up with this thought in my head: you could build a salt cave in Lexington. It was almost divine. I mean, maybe it was divine. Like, it just popped in my head. It was not, I don't even know how to describe it. It was like otherworldly. It truly was like somebody just plopped this idea in my head, and I woke up and was like, epiphany, I'm going to open a salt cave. And then I'm like, you are insane. What is wrong with you? Where is this coming from? You have a very good job that, albeit you're getting burned out with and you're kind of tired of doing, but it's a good job and you are comfortable and you have a lot of flexibility. Why in the actual heck would you want to go do this? And it just wouldn't go away. I could not shake it. I really just couldn't get it out of my head. And so I told myself, all right, just to prove that you aren't crazy, you are going to put a business plan together and you're going to give yourself 12 months to do it. And if you still want to do it after 12 months, then go ahead. I talk to myself all the time.
Well, you gave yourself permission.
I did. I gave myself permission to pursue. I think that's what it was. I wasn't quite there on actually doing it, but I gave myself permission to pursue it. I had no idea how I was going to afford it either. I didn't know what it cost. I didn't know. I mean, I knew it wasn't free or cheap. I just knew. And this was like, so my intention for January 2020 was to do a business plan to open a salt cave. And then, COVID comes and nobody wants to breathe or be anywhere near anybody else. And then I'm thinking, okay, wait a minute. Salt caves are really good for respiratory health. And I was thinking, like, I suffer from allergies. I've always, suffered from allergies ever since I've moved to Kentucky. And the only thing that's really ever helped was when I went to that salt cave. And so I'm kind of like starting to like connect dots now with like respiratory health and all that. And in the meantime, everything's getting shut down. My job was there, but we were basically furloughed for several months. And I thought, well, I'll just put my time into my business plan, which I did. And I got the thing done in like 6 months. And in the meantime, I took a business accelerator like course. It was an online women's group with a local coach who was amazing. I was a test subject for Michelle during that time, and her coaching was also amazing. And I was doing yoga online. I was teaching some yoga online. And the whole 2020 just like allowed me, if, I didn't just worry about it, it allowed me to have the time and the space to get all that done. By I think towards the end of the year, when it was getting a little, like people were lightening up and you could travel again. And I went to visit Amy in Baltimore. And I remember thinking like, okay, I can do some research because I should go see some other salt caves. Because I'd been to one in Louisville, which was very similar to what I wanted. And I'd been to the other one near me, which was more of a room. And I'd been to the Asheville one, but that was it. So I started like everywhere I'd go traveling, which wasn't much then, I would visit a salt cave. And that's kind of how it started. I mean, I feel like I'm just blah, 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 blah.
Well, and I feel like I remember traveling with you one time. This was like before all that, like before you had decided this is what you were going to do. And I feel like it was like around Mother's Day or something. And you and your mom and your sister were going, because I feel like I was like, and I could be making this up in my head, but this is like, I feel like I was like, what are you guys doing for Mother's Day or something? And you were like,
oh yeah,
we took my mom. This is going to sound really weird, but this is what we're doing. And I was like, oh, what?
We did that. We took her to the one near us. It was the salt room. We took her to the salt room. She also always had really bad sinus issues. And she really enjoyed it too. But
yeah, I remember traveling with you before, like you guys, the three of you were going to go or something. Yeah.
Because I think at that point it was like definitely on my radar because I had been to the one in Asheville, and the whole holistic health thing just really intrigued me. I think like I didn't know really anything about it, and most of my life I was pretty like mainstream, and even though I think I had an inner hippie going on, I was always like pushing her down. I was like, you just stay put back there where, because I had a really mainstream job. Like it, it wasn't like you had to kind of fit in, and there was a certain look and, way to dress and yeah. And then when I went to yoga, I felt so much more like myself. I think that's what really started making me think I wanted to make a change.
Yeah. So that kind of lends itself to my other question that I have. So you did make a really big change, because let's face it, working in ag, women working in ag, right? Very traditional sort of environment. Yeah, can be a little not welcoming to your inner hippie. I'll just leave it at that. Like, it's not a thing that, um, you'd be bringing out there, right? So,
Not a
so
very woke industry.
no, yeah, just, maybe it's changing a little. I don't know, because I had certainly had that feeling too, where I never talked about all the woo woo and the coaching stuff and all of that. Like, I definitely felt like that would not, yeah, somehow that would be a check minus, as opposed to a big, yay, you go girl. Anyway, so you went from that environment, and you were really successful in that environment. Like, you knew how to play the game, did the thing. But you clearly knew you were not digging it and getting a little burned out, and it wasn't, wasn't all that. So you went from, you didn't just do like a little change. Like, so you went from that to like somewhere where like your inner hippie would be way happier. Um, so is it what you thought it would be? Like, is that what it's turned out to be? Kind of what you were, I don't know, hoping? It is it what you were after? Like, once you got there, were you like, "Oh yeah, this is thank goodness this is what I really, I'm really much happier here. This is what I thought it would be."
Yeah. I mean, the simple answer is yes.
Mm.
It's like everything I hoped it would be. In that I do truly feel like it kind of was my calling.
Mm.
And I feel like I'm kind of an introvert. Like, people who know me would know that, but people who don't know me as well would be surprised to hear that I'm an introvert. I think I'm a person who the way I recharge is that I need to be alone. And so I love being around people that I feel like are, open and ready to receive. And the people that come through our doors are those kinds of people for the most part. And just watching people who've never done anything like this, but are open to receiving, come in, do the salt cave or do anything that we offer. Cause now we do have all the yoga, and we have massage therapy, and we have, foot detox soaks and infrared saunas and coaching and all
Sound
kinds of
baths.
workshops. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully we'll have one with the three of us in the future.
It'd be fun.
Workshoppy things, but we literally, like, you can see people transform, like before they go in and when they come out. There's just this sense of peace that they kind of come out with, or even if it's just rest and relaxation, especially people who are really in high stress jobs or are highly focused, highly motivated, the people who are under a lot of pressure. If they really make that time for themselves and go in and do a session, it's amazing. Actually, it reminds me of this when I took Amy to the Salt Cave near Baltimore, because I think there was a funny thing that happened with your watch that tracks all your vitals.
Oh, yeah. Like my resting heart rate.
Yes. Like like after a session, and we were in there because Amy is, I would consider, very, highly motivated, focused, like, high active, very active. And your sleep patterns are less than probably ideal. I think I can be fair to say that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very kind.
But like after that salt cave session, I remember you saying something about like the stats on your watch were showing you like that this was like the most rested you've been in like a week or something.
Yeah, my resting heart rate like really dropped while I was in there. I think it just because I was like so relaxed and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we need more studies like that.
Yeah. Definitely.
But yeah, so, and I worked my other job for 2 years, alongside the opening, because it was pretty quiet in the beginning too. And so that was tough. I was really having to dose my own medicine to myself because I was working my other job full time and I didn't feel right to not give it my full effort. But I also knew that my focus wasn't 100% there anymore. And so I was kind of just trying to phase out. And after 2 years, I did that and let it go. And it was kind of a little scary at first because I was losing income and insurance and all that, like, stability. But then after year 3 of not having that safety net and not having the pressure of having to perform at that job and also grow my other business was a huge weight and a huge relief. And it was, so much easier the 3rd year because of that. So yeah, it's been honestly the best choice of, as far as change or transition I think I've ever made. I feel like it's nourishing not only to me, but to people who come in and utilize our space. And now that I've got some people that work for me, like, I get that validation from them too, which is really special. Like, they'll say, like, I love working here, or like, I feel so good when I'm here. And like, to have an employee say that just makes you feel, so good.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
I get off on a tangent and I don't even remember what the question was.
No, that is really, I'm not sure you realize how inspiring that story is or has the potential to be. Yeah.
I love you guys.
I think more people, especially,
it's never too late. It's never too late.
I know.
Especially women, right? Like, yeah. And I think there are so many people who, certainly myself included, right, who think about making that leap, like, who really come up against, hey, this job or this career or whatever that was great suddenly becomes, not so inspiring or motivating or whatever. There's a change, right? Like, things are great until they're not, right? And I think there's such a, like, once you have the awareness that something, that it could be, something else could be better, it is really challenging to make that leap. And that's why I was like, oh, Lara has to tell, like, the whole story. Like, people need to hear the whole story because, that is it's really inspiring. You need to get out there and tell that story more.
I feel like we saved the best for last.
It's just such a, yeah. And honestly, the fact that you're headed to Italy I mean, stop it right now. And I love the whole thing around, I guess I hadn't heard the whole story around the card under the chair and, like, right, and then having that also, when we've been talking about doing some sort of retreat or something to celebrate Lara's 5th anniversary, which will be next April. And, as I'm, obviously I'm already starting to think, okay, well, what do we do and what do we put together and what would be impactful and all of that. And something like that where, using that as like a takeaway, right? Like, the idea of, mailing that to the person at the, so many
we're gonna do some, like, brainstorming now on live.
Not live. Everyone gets to brainstorm.
Like a little, it would be
you get
fun
to listen to the behind the scenes of Monkey Chatter.
Seriously, I think, whoever's listening, like, I feel like there's a lot of women out there who might be interested in just coming to a workshop or a little mini retreat where they're taking away, like, look, it's never too late. You don't have to have an epiphany to make a change. First of all, like, that's one thing I would definitely want to throw out there is, like, that's how it happened for me. But there's so many people who don't get that and they still go on and make big transitions and successful, businesses or
Well, and quite honestly, Lara, your epiphany didn't really come until you had already taken the step to do the yoga. Do you know what I mean? Like you had lots of little like steps or, following, I like to think of those things as like when you're drawn to something as opposed to like forcing yourself or being pulled or what, it's different when you're just sort of drawn to do something. And that was like the yoga training was sort of that, like, well, I'll go ahead and, try that. So like the epiphany can sound like, oh, it was an epiphany, but it really, sort of came, you did a lot of work beforehand, right?
Yeah, that's true. I was just thinking about that exact thing because I was thinking, it was a lot of little baby steps before that so-called epiphany came. I mean, first of all, I had been to a few salt caves, and that's not everybody has. And second of all, like you said, I think I started to, well, and even back when I was doing the job that became, eventually kind of like I burned out on because it was, sales and pressure and all that. What drew me to the area I live was really kind of like something that I was drawn to. Like you're saying, Michelle, like following what your passion is or your interest. I would not own the salt cave today if I didn't start with moving to Kentucky because I was this horse crazy person that just wanted to be near horses and be able to make a living near horses. And then I was good at what I did, but I was lucky too that I got good jobs and landed in the right places and ended up, being able to save money during 2020. And, we had a home that I could, take a second mortgage out on. Tip. That's cheaper than a business loan, people. Because right now, we don't want to talk about interest rates. But back then, 2020 was a darn good time to take a second mortgage out on your house. But honestly, like you're so right, Michelle. It's all these little things that add up along the way. And like I just always tell people, like if you're drawn to something, just do the thing. Take the class. Do the business coaching. Do the yoga. Whatever it is that is just calling you, just do it. And once you take the first baby step, that's when everything else just starts to kind of fall into place.
I'm like, oh.
Here we are, just dispensing out business advice. And I cannot underestimate. Wait, no, it's the other way. I cannot overestimate how important business coaching was and is. In fact, I'm currently still doing it. I joined a group coaching class with someone that resonated with me, and there's really good people all over the country. And her name's Bethany Bubenzer. She's amazing. She's like a soulful business coach. She is magical. She's a goddess. She's a business like professional. Like she is the whole package. Honestly, there's something about her. She was a yoga teacher. That's how I met her, is I took a yoga class with her. And I was just so drawn to her style. And then I joined this group of ladies in 2020 over Zoom, even though 3 of us were in Lexington. And I really don't know if I would have completed the business plan and really gotten as far as I did without that community and that support. And these were all ladies who were changing.
Who you hang with matters.
Who you hang with matters. And I'm still close to everybody from that original group well, maybe not everybody, but most of them. And 2 of them have workshopped with me at the Salt Cave. And one of them is the one I'm going to Italy with. And now I'm taking my second group coaching class with Bethany. So, I mean, yeah, that stuff is important. And sometimes it feels like a big investment, but you're not investing in something that you could lose your money. You're investing in you and your future. So there's no throwing your money away when it comes to that. Like, you can't mess up when you're doing that.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned earlier about having to make decisions on your own. I think a lot of the times when you're the sole proprietor, or it's, that's where having a good business coach or a good community or whatever. And I would think, just having tried to do a few little things on my own over the years without that kind of support, it's really easy to get lost in the weeds of it, right? Like, oh, I need, without some direction and guidance. So I love that you gave that shout out to that piece, because I think it is hard to start things when it's just you. And it is also challenging, and I guess this is where you trust your gut and know yourself. There's so many quote unquote coaches out there, and so many it's hard to sometimes, because I think about some of the, folks I've worked with trying to set up my own little coaching slice of heaven. And some have been helpful. And honestly, one I find, I just like cut my losses at a certain point. I was like, you know what, this is not, um, you know, not what I signed up for. So I love that you were able to find somebody who sort of it sounds like you talk about the hippie, your inner hippie. So it sounds like Bethany, right? Is that her name?
Bethany Bubenzer, yeah.
Yeah, that she was able to speak to that part of you, as well as help you build this business in a way that was authentic for you. Like, it's what you wanted to build. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that it can be challenging to do both, and that's where having some guidance, people, who ask, that's what coaches do, right? They ask the right questions. They don't tell you what to do.
Yeah.
They ask you the right questions, and then they show you that you know what to do. You just didn't know how to get there.
Yeah. And then providing that support, that scaffolding to help you, with the nuts and bolts, I think, are where, at least that's where I usually get stuck, is the nuts and bolts of the thing. And yeah, so that was great, Lara. I'm so inspired by you. I'm like, oh, look at Lara. Look what Lara built.
I mean, I do that. This sounds like corny, but I do feel honored that you feel that way, because I mean,
we are in awe of you.
I would be an inspiration to anybody, but I'm very happy that if anybody feels inspired, and that's why I would want to share the whole story. And
we got to figure out a way to really bring that to the world in a bigger way. So anybody listening to this podcast,
I'm going to share this episode on my Salt Cave information for sure.
Anybody,
and like we'll put some information too in, on the show notes too, about if you want to look up Bethany, and maybe she'll be a good fit for you. She's not going to be a good fit for everybody, but and the Italy retreat, we'll put some information up about that if you want to come and join me and Colleen, who also went through that program. And if you want to come next year for the Three Monkeys Wellness Retreat, that'd be awesome. It's gonna be beautiful. I will say this, like, when I know we're probably getting close to time, but
I was gonna ask another question, but I don't think we're gonna try to make that happen.
I'll make it short. I mean, I'll try to answer it short.
No, go ahead, finish what you're saying.
I was just gonna say, since I've opened, there's been two people who, one lady actually opened a salt cave about an hour south of me, and she came in and picked my brain a little bit, and I didn't give her everything. First of all, I have a non-disclosure with the person who built my cave, so I couldn't give her any logistical stuff, but just operational stuff. And then recently, another client who's been coming pretty regularly was saying she'd really like to bring salt therapy to the small town that she's from, which is also far away. So I was like, that's kind of cool. There's room for more. That's the other thing I would want to say. Like, people get so competitive in there's room for all of us. Like, holistic health and wellness and all these things, it's just starting to take hold with people. People are just starting to realize how important it is to prevent illness instead of waiting till they get sick, and doing these things for ourselves, and that rest is okay. and it's not a luxury and it's not being lazy, that it's necessity for being healthy. And the more people that learn that and the more little businesses that crop up that offer that, the better we're all going to be.
Yes, that. So real quick. All right. So this is your test.
Okay.
Can you answer this question in under 3 minutes?
Okay. Try.
This will be the hardest thing you've done all night.
Probably.
So you have always been like super calm, pretty like just very zen, peaceful, thoughtful. I had to laugh whenever Michelle said the word, talked about you being thoughtful earlier,
that's a good way.
And all of that. So one, how did you get to be that way? And two, as someone who isn't, what words of advice do you have for those of us who may need a little help on that in that department? So ready, go.
Okay. I could probably answer that in one word, and that would be yoga. But honestly,
I knew you were going to say
I'm
that.
going to make this short. But honestly, I was not always calm. And you can just ask my ex-husband and my kids. They know the real me. I had a terrible temper. I was very quick to react. And I got very emotional. I'm still a very emotional person. But over the years, and probably age, let's face it, like as we age, things aren't as important, like small things. Don't sweat the small stuff, right?
Yeah.
But yoga, I think, is what tied it all together for me. Just being mindful and focusing on your body and your breath gives you the space to be thoughtful.
Well,
dang it. I'm going to have to do freaking yoga after all.
I'm going to make a convert out of you.
Yeah.
No, I actually don't hate yoga.
Yeah. And like I said, it took me 20 some years before it became a real
practice
habit. Yeah.
Yeah.
From a sporadic practice to more of a habit. And sometimes yoga is just sitting and breathing. It doesn't mean, twisting your body into all kinds of crazy shapes. There are some days where I don't do any physical yoga poses, but I do yoga. I practice, not do.
We should probably do an episode on yoga.
Yeah.
Just yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure you could fill that.
Probably.
Right. I think maybe Amy and I should, try and do some do a little yoga challenge, and then we could share our results.
I feel like we always talk about doing these challenges and then we never do them.
So we'll have to set a yoga podcast date and then build in a challenge ahead of it so that we have to do it.
Yeah, right? I think that's a good idea. Yes, that's a great idea because we never do them afterward.
Right. So maybe that's what we should do. So stay tuned, everybody. We'll figure that out.
Yeah, along with lots of other things we need to figure out.
Let us know if there's something you want us to, if you're listening and you want us to figure something out.
Yeah.
We'll do our best. So you want to close us out?
Yeah.
Who's gonna count us down for our?
Thanks for listening to me.
Do you have any parting words?
Yeah, words of wisdom.
No.
Other than
breathe.
Do yoga,
just breathe.
That's important.
Yeah. Mindful breathing.
Good too. Okay.
And who you hang with matters.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. On that note, ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Monkey chatter, monkey chatter. Who you hang with matters.
Thanks for listening to Monkey Chatter today. As a reminder, we want to let you know that while we think we are really smart, none of us are doctors or medical professionals. So anything that we say or suggest on this podcast should be run by your doctor before you make any major lifestyle, nutrition, or medication changes. Take care and be well, friends.